Hi, everyone. Hi, Ellie. Thank you so much for being here. I am so excited to talk with you today. I was trying to think of what we could kind of name our interview today, and I figured I'd call it Secrets to Building a Strong and Lasting Relationship. So I feel like we cover a lot of different aspects related to that. But before we dive in and I start asking you questions related to that, can you just let us know a bit about who you are, what you do, and what led you down the path to doing what you're doing today?
Yeah. So my name is Ellie, and what I do is I help young women that are usually just starting their marriage journey or are thinking about it, and they kind of want to find the right partner, and maybe they're not sure why things aren't going as smooth as they had pictured in their head with their partner. And I just kind of help guide them through that awkward phase of getting used to their partner, so that their relationship turns out to be just as wonderful as they wanted it to be. Because oftentimes we aren't, built with the skills and knowledge that we need in order to have a healthy and thriving relationship. And the way that I got started was because I was one of those girls when I got married and I had no idea what I was doing. And a lot of things that I could have done better in my marriage, I later picked up when I started listening to coaches and relationship experts. And then I got so passionate about this whole thing because I was coaching all of my friends that I was like, hey, you know what? Maybe this is what I'm meant to do. And so that's why I'm here.
That's awesome. That's usually how it happens, eh? We kind of go through it, we learn the hard way, and then we want to help people avoid that. I love how you share the whole idea of getting like women to bring their relationship back to how they pictured it. Like I always talk about how like when I was a little girl, I used to always dream of my dream relationship, like not so much like my wedding day. Like I just really dreamt of like the day-to-day relationship and how I felt. Were you like that too growing up? Like you had this vision for yourself?
I did. And I think it comes from, a lot of the movies that we watch and
Mhm.
growing up with princesses and they have their perfect prince. And that kind of like, you fantasize it a little bit. And then when you get into reality, you're like, oh my gosh, this is not at all like what happens now? We're not married. Now what?
Yeah. Why isn't it like the movie? Like, they missed a scene in the movie. They missed sharing something. Oh, geez. Well, you know what? So let's hop into the questions now. So I want to know from you, like, is it common in your experience for couples to lose kind of that passion or that spark in their relationship, especially like the longer they're in the relationship together? What have you seen or experienced for yourself?
Yeah, so I definitely have noticed that almost every couple that I've talked to does have at least a phase or two within their relationship where they don't feel as passionate about each other. And this is extremely normal. People start to freak out and they think that, oh my gosh, maybe there's something wrong, maybe we're missing something, maybe this isn't my person. And all those thoughts are completely normal. It actually has a lot to do with our chemistry and things that are going on, and then day-to-day stress life, if you have kids, things, all of those things, they impact the way that you feel towards your spouse. And of course, if we're neglecting ourselves, if there's something that we aren't feeling for ourselves, a lot of times we just tend to put that blame on our partner, even though it's really not their responsibility to make us happy. So we tend to think that, oh my gosh, well, now our marriage is dying or our relationship is headed downhill. In reality, it's not that bad. And so I do see that in almost everybody, and people that have been married for a while too. I hear them sometimes say like, things aren't the same as they used to be. And then my next question to them is, well, what are you doing to keep it that way? And they're like, well, they thought it was going to be there. So it's very,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I feel like we as women, or maybe people in general, we don't talk about it as like enough, right? Like it is normal. I totally agree with you, but we don't always see that part of it. Maybe even the movies when it's kind of glamorized and everything, or people don't want to talk about it, especially now with social media. Like everyone's like picture perfect and like their perfect selfie couple shots and stuff. And we kind of forget that, there's going to be phases and stages in the relationship where things are a bit more difficult. And especially like if you haven't learned the tools growing up or you haven't gotten the perfect, role models, whether that was intentional or unintentional on your parents' part, not to blame anyone else, right? Like we sometimes we go through that because we just don't know how to navigate it. One, And two, it's perfectly normal, like you said, right?
Yeah. And I also think, maybe there's a fear that comes into play as well. They feel like, well, if I say something, it's going to sound like, our relationship is doing so horrible. So they have this fear of like telling somebody about it or asking. And that kind of helps them develop, like this sense of, oh my gosh, panic, there's a
Yeah.
huge panic, man, and I can't tell anybody because everybody's going to be asking me about it, or they're going to be prying into our relationship. So I have noticed that quite often as well.
Yeah, I see that too. And even just like, some, I mean, on groups online and stuff. And sometimes what I notice happens too is like other women will rally towards each other in a good way, right? But sometimes we'll be like, oh my gosh, it's your partner, or, he's toxic, or nowadays with all these labels, right? Oh, he's a narcissist. And then it's like you open this can of worms and it's like, okay, I just, I don't want to say anything because people might kind of put all this fear in me or make me doubt myself, or make me like encourage me to just leave and not do anything. So there's all these factors, right, that kind of like can mess with our heads a little bit, I feel like.
100%. I've seen that too.
Yeah. So when would you think it's a good time to be concerned about, losing the spark or losing the passion? Like what signs do you encourage women to look for to really help identify and clearly know if it is, what's going on in the relationship?
I usually, well, when I hear people come to me, it's usually when they have like a little bit of resentment towards their partner, and it starts to pile up. Their partner could have just done something and it kind of triggers them, and they just have this feeling of like, like, oh, I wish he wasn't like that. That's usually your first few cues that, okay, something is a little off. Maybe we need to take a little deep dive into ourselves and understand why exactly we are feeling those emotions when it arises with our partner. And I think that's like the peak of when you could either, you know, go down the road of a very negative relationship or figure out how to go back to what you actually wanted from your partner, what you saw in them in the beginning, what you want them to treat you like. So usually that's when I would say like the alarm is going off. Like,
Yeah.
hey, something needs to happen here, this isn't going where you want it to be.
I love that. Like specifically, I love how you said the word resentment too, because I know I even felt that in my own relationship when when I was going through that with my husband. He was my boyfriend back in the day, and I could just feel that resentment building up. And it wasn't until I took a good look at myself, like you said, right? Either looking at what were the unmet needs, or why was I not able to communicate what I needed, right? That's a lot of times that's why things were snowballing. I was just letting things add up, or I was hoping that he would change or he would stop doing it, or, that maybe it was a phase and I just get over it. But no, it was just kind of building this undercurrent between the two of us. And then I noticed like, we're just snapping at everything. We're just arguing over the smallest things. Like I'm walking on eggshells all of a sudden, and we don't realize it's all these like little micro moments of resentment that are just like piling up. All right.
Mhm.
So, what do you do? What do you advise women to do if they are afraid their partner won't change to some of the changes they make? So, say you're working with a woman and, she's all ready to do the things and change how she shows up in the relationship, how she communicates, but she has that fear, right? Like maybe it's that fear that nothing's going to change, or maybe there's even like I notice even for myself or women, there's the fear that what if I do it and it has like the opposite effect? Like it makes things worse. Like not that it doesn't change anything, but it like like makes him like leave or mad or makes things worse, like I said. So what do you think about that? What do you say typically?
Usually, when someone is having this kind of fear or worry about, their partner not responding to what they're doing, I would say this is the moment when you have to kind of take a step back and realize what you have control over and allow your partner to be themselves. Because no matter what, whatever you do, it is going to impact your relationship. Whether you continue, down the path you have been going and you have these like friction moments that aren't aligning with what you want, it's just going to continue coming back to you. And when you stop and you realize, hey, whatever he does is up to him. He is a person with his own free will. and I am myself, right? And I want to show up as my most authentic and genuine self in our relationship because I believe that that's who I am. And my partner deserves the best version of me. And when you come from that kind of intention, your partner feels it, right? In anything
Yeah.
that you do, they feel it. And yes, I would actually advise them to have a little patience because sometimes their partner can't catch on to our new way of being when they've been so used to the old cycle or the way that you guys just, we all as couples, we all have this bickering that we're so used to, and somehow every argument goes right back to that system, you know?
Yeah, it's automatic, like automatic response.
Exactly. So when you start changing these things, don't be surprised when your partner wants to go back to what he's used to. This is completely normal and it will take some time to adjust. But when your partner sees you showing up with this genuine love for them, even if you can't, I'm not telling anybody to act. If you don't feel something, don't be it. But
Yeah, no
reacting,
faking.
when you stop reacting to those things, it allows them to like see, oh my gosh, well, she's doing something different. Let me test it again. So they try to get you back into that cycle and they see
Yeah.
that again, she's responding differently. And it forces them to change something also. And I truly believe this is one of my philosophies and my way of teaching is I believe that 60% of what we do at least impacts our relationship. The way our relationship gets to go, I truly believe that if every person took a hard look, at least 60% of the things that occur come from you. And so
Wow.
this way we're able to take that responsibility on ourselves and detach from all the defense mechanisms that we're used to and just coming from that kind of scarcity mindset, the faster we will see things improve in our relationship. And yes, there are a small percentage, and I say like really small percentage of people that just won't respond to anything that their partner does. But your odds for that actually happening are way less than they are for them to implement new things in the relationship that you want to see. And when you extend kindness, what's the natural human response? The other person wants to reciprocate that, right? So
Yeah.
that's really what you're doing here.
Yeah, I love that stat that you shared, 60%. And I feel like, sometimes it might be frustrating, especially in the beginning, if you're in it and you're not ready to see it. It might be frustrating to think that, okay, I hold responsibility and I need to do something. Like a lot of women feel like they've tried everything already, they've been trying things. But I feel like it's actually an empowering thought. Like you have the power, like own that as a woman, right? Like women empowerment. So I love that. I noticed that even for myself and my clients, the more you take kind of responsibility and ownership, and it's like a win-win too. Like a lot of times it's about focusing on yourself. And I feel like not focusing on yourself in a way of distancing yourself or just growing apart, but like working on yourself in the way, like you said, of how you show up. And that benefits him and you at the end of the day, right? And I feel like that's super attractive too. A lot of times in the beginning of your relationship, a lot of times you're more yourself, you put that effort into yourself, and that's part of like what created that spark and that passion. And then we lose it over time. And the more you can bring that back, the more you feel good, and the more you continue to be magnetic and have that attraction and that spark and that flame with your partner too. So it's like kind of win-win. And like you said, the odds of it going the other way are super small. So might as well go for like what you have the greatest odds of benefiting from.
Yeah, you said it beautifully.
Awesome. So let's give the women listening today a few like tangible tips that they can take away from today. So what are like two or three effective ways that a partner can change the trajectory of the relationship? What are some small steps that women can start taking now?
I'm gonna give you two that I go by all the time. These are like safe, tips that I've never proved anybody wrong. So the first would be that you need to internalize the way that you feel. Like, so for example, if your partner is doing something to trigger you, if you just take a moment before you respond and you think about it like, okay, I am feeling blank emotion. Is it sadness? Is it hurt? Because he said this or that? Or you like think about it for just a moment and allow yourself, acknowledge your own feelings. This like helps so much because it takes all the pressure off and you don't feel like this frantic, like, oh my gosh, I gotta get him back. You don't feel the whole, it totally kills the buildup of the negative emotions that you don't want to show up. And then you think about it, just, internalize, okay, he said this, it may be hurtful, it might make me feel sad, it might, whatever the emotion is. And you decide that, okay, even though he did this, maybe he doesn't mean it, maybe he does. We don't know. But I'm going to choose to respond in this way because, I love my partner, or I just respect him as a human being. Or, one of the things I like to tell women is if you are able to treat a complete stranger better than your spouse or your partner, that's when we need to take a hard look at what we're doing, because clearly there's your closest people deserve the most love from you, even if they may be messed up in some way. Like, think about children, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes they do something, like, especially with toddlers, if they're being bratty, but you still love them, so you're going to extend that patience. Why don't we do the same for our partner?
Hmm.
So, that's something that I like to tell my clients is just take a moment for yourself, validate your own feelings, and then respond from a place that you want, the way that you want to talk to your partner and communicate with them. And the second one is also, it's your intention, what you're thinking about when you talk about your partner or when you talk to them. It really comes through. We may not think it, we might think all these bad things about them or like call them names in our head,
Yeah.
but they feel it. They feel in our tone, in our stance, the way it's the vibe, it's the atmosphere that's created, they feel it. We're very intuitive human beings. So the more you can just, whatever you respond, you decide to show kindness, you decide to be thoughtful, it will completely change everything. Even if you don't say it, you don't verbalize it,
Yeah.
but the way that you respond to something, even if it's like a negative interaction, they feel it differently. And you'll notice whatever you say, they'll say it in a much softer way as well. So those are two things that someone can do that's very practical, very simple, and it seems almost seamless, but it does such a huge thing because everything is building up in our head, your thoughts and everything, it's all building up. So when you help yourself just eliminate that like intensity, it
Yeah.
helps you to think clearly and it helps you to show up better in the relationship.
Yeah. Those are like simple things, like you said, but they're so powerful. And it's funny because sometimes these are the hardest things to overcome. Like even just like kind of being intentional, like oftentimes I find as women, we feel like, and I know I experienced it myself, I got into this mode of, I feel like I need to punish him sort of thing. So it's hard to then kind of be kind. And I love the example you gave about the kids too, right? About your own children. Like you wouldn't want to punish them all the time like that either. Like these are the people who are closest to us. And same thing with your spouse, right? So I love that. And even just like when we're in the moment, like you were sharing, and just thinking about your feelings, just getting you back into your logical, rational mind instead of just reacting, right? That's a great way to do it. Just even like I say, just take a deep breath, right? And then, like you say, identify that emotion, just kind of get specific too. That'll help you really think about things too, instead of just thinking, okay, I'm angry. Well, are you really angry? Or are you disappointed? Or are you kind of hurt? Or, how specific can you get to really just stay kind of in that rational zone so you're not just reacting, and then you can be intentional. And I love how you shared a little bit about, like, I see it as kind of looking at the positive intention. Like sometimes I was working with a client not too long ago, and the guy she was dating told her to put on her seatbelt when they were in the car, and she got so offended. And I was like, well, what's the positive intention behind that? And she's like, well, I guess he wants me to be safe. I'm like, yes, like the more you can just come back and see, like, oh, shoot, okay, it totally changes how, well, number one, like you said, what your vibe's going to be like, because men feel it. Even though sometimes we're like, why can't he read my mind? Well, he can probably read your vibe if you're full of resentment, right? So, yeah. So that made me think of that example. I don't know what you think, but if you've seen the similar examples with women, but yeah, so great.
I agree with you. A lot of it is just our perception, of things. They may be meaning something else, but it reminds us of something that we didn't like that happened, whenever, and we associate it with that in some sort of way.
Yeah.
So just taking a moment to reflect, it helps a lot.
Yeah, so much. Well, do you know what? Just last question for today. What would you say to women, like in terms of how do you know when it is time to walk away? Like you said, right? And I agree. There are some men out there who will maybe never respond to your changes or, but how do you really know? And I know we had a chat on IG and you said a powerful word. So I hope you say it again, but I'll leave the floor open to you and then I'll bring it up if I don't hear it. But so when is it time to walk away?
I think that, well, first we have to acknowledge that every person has the free will to walk away whenever they want. And we need to remember that about our partner as well. They have the free will to walk away from us too. So it goes both ways. And if you truly want to, you can do it at any time. However, in long-lasting relationships, the key is that the person chooses the other person all the time, right? And in my opinion, I think most marriages they can survive if both people are willing to do the work. But one, of course, has to be the starter. Someone
Yeah.
has to get started and has to have a great deal of patience and love for the other person in order to get it to where it needs to be. The times when I think that it's just there's no way around it, you probably should walk away, is when there's abuse going on, when it's an unsafe environment, when it's just so toxic. And I really use that word diligently because I don't like
Yeah.
that it's always, but you usually know when the relationship is just never going to get better. And unfortunately there are some cases where that does happen, but for the majority of people we just don't have the skills and the right tools in order to get the relationship where it needs to be.
Yeah.
So there are a few instances. I don't remember what word I said. Did I mention it or no?
You said a question you like to ask women is what would you regret?
Yes.
That stuck with me. I'm like, oh.
Yeah, what I like to tell some of my clients is, some of them they come in and they're so like they're not sure if the spark is still there. They're kind of over it. It doesn't seem like anything is going to get better. But remember, we're all, putting everything onto our partner. A lot of the time,
Yeah.
we're not trying to take ownership. It's just a human reaction, defense mechanism. So I like to ask them, are you ready, to walk away? What would you regret, later on if you see that person in another relationship? Is there anything
Mhm.
you would regret that you didn't you didn't try harder? And sometimes that's like the light bulb moment and they're like, oh my gosh, well yeah, what if I did see him happy with somebody else? Yeah, maybe I should try this and that. And all of a sudden it gets your brain going in the direction we want it to go. you
Yeah.
know Instead of focusing on, what, I feel stuck, I want to get out of here, into, oh my gosh, okay, maybe I do have something great. I'm just looking at it in a very negative way because of the negative emotions I haven't processed.
Yeah.
And I'm putting that onto my partner, associating that with them, and oftentimes name calling them, labeling them as such, attaching it to their identity. And that's kind of the little thing that you can't not focus on, that
Yeah.
eventually breaks a lot of couples apart, unfortunately.
Yeah, so true. All right. Thank you for sharing that. I'm glad we got to talk about that. So, so powerful. Well, hey, this was an amazing chat. And I know the women watching are going to want to know what you have going on, where they can find you online. Can you share a bit about that with us?
Yeah, so they can find me on Instagram, on YouTube. My handle is the same everywhere. It's XOLE Lily. And I do have a few spots open for individual coaching session. Although I'm very limited on that right now because I'm going to do a course really soon. And so that's what I'm working on currently. It's going to be a course that kind of helps couples, well, not couples, ladies, hopefully, helps them kind of take a deeper look at things and understand what skills they're missing in order to make that relationship flourish. So, yeah, that's pretty much it.
That's awesome. I'll put the links in the description below for women to find it. Thank you so much again. And I hope we can chat again soon.
Yes, it was such a pleasure. Thank you so much for talking to me.